Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling one of the absolute biggest buzzwords in modern cannabis cultivation right now, crop steering. We hear about it constantly, pushing the plant harder, dialing in those drybacks, stacking EC. But there's this massive paradox at the heart of this whole trend, and honestly, it's a topic that a ton of people in the industry are quietly struggling with. I want you to really think about this for a second. What if the exact technique you're using to increase your crop's quality is actually the very thing slowing your plants down? Crazy, right? Everyone talks about pushing the plant harder to get better flower, but almost nobody stops to ask, hey, can you push it too far? Well, spoiler alert, you absolutely can. Which brings us to our first section, the crop steering paradox, or ambition versus reality.
Before we get too deep in the weeds here, let's just establish a quick baseline. Crop steering isn't some kind of dark magic. It's really just controlled stress management. The whole goal is to use environmental levers, things like your irrigation timing, root zone EC, substrate moisture, your light, VPD, temperature, nutrition, all of that to guide the plant's behavior. Put simply, we're just using these tools to tell the plant exactly what we want it to do. And this brilliantly illustrates how we basically have two main directions we can steer. Over on the left, we've got vegetative steering. This is all about expansion during early growth. We're talking bigger leaves, stronger roots, way more branching, just building up that overall biomass. Now contrast that with generative steering on the right. We use this later on, right during early and mid-flower, to tell the plant, hey, focus on reproduction. We want to reduce that excessive stretch and really dial in the flower formation. So we're guiding the plant in entirely different ways depending on what phase it's in. Let's move right along to our next section, signals versus punishment and the danger of hubris. Listen to this quote closely because it's a real game changer. Steering is not the same as punishment. A plant needs signals, it does not need abuse. This is such a critical mindset shift, you guys. See, when crop steering goes too far and becomes punitive, the plant doesn't just magically become more productive. No way. Instead, it gets stressed out, its growth becomes super inconsistent, and honestly, its potential can be permanently limited. Let's take a moderate dryback, for example. That's a great signal. It encourages root exploration, helps control growth, all good things. But an excessive dryback, that's just straight up punishment. You end up damaging root hairs, slowing down nutrient uptake, and literally reducing photosynthesis. When you do this, you're going to see wildly uneven responses across your room. One plant might handle it okay, sure, but the guy next to it wilts, and the one next to that starts stacking salts in the root zone. And just like that, your beautiful, uniform crop is a total mess. The exact same thing happens with EC stacking. Now, we know increasing root zone EC is a solid generative signal to push the plant toward flower development. But if you push that EC way too high, you create massive osmotic pressure right around the roots. The craziest part about this is that even if your substrate is physically soaking wet, the plant behaves like it's dying of thirst. The osmotic pressure is just too strong for it to pull the water in. And what does that mean? Leaf edge burn, slowed growth, reduced transpiration, and smaller flowers. And this right here leads to a massive epiphany for a lot of cultivators. You're walking the room, you see nutrient imbalance, you see smaller flowers, and your brain immediately goes, oh, the plant needs more food. But wait, the plant is not hungry, it's overwhelmed. You aren't underfeeding it. Your root system is actually locked out by the very generative steering signals you just forced onto it. Okay, let's get into section 3, the dangers of oversteering and losing control. One of the biggest traps in modern growing, for sure, is copying someone else's recipe without actually understanding your own room. Steering depends entirely on the full system. I mean, think about all the variables at play here. Light intensity, CO2, air movement, root zone temp, pot size, substrate, genetics, the whole shebang. This is exactly why a heavy dryback strategy that absolutely crushes it in rock wool under massive lights with perfect climate control will turn into a complete disaster if you try to replicate it in coco coir under lower light with unstable humidity. It just doesn't translate. And here's another incredibly common mistake we see all the time: pushing generative steering way too hard, way too early in flower. During that first stretch phase, your plant still desperately needs energy, water, and nutrients just to build its physical structure. If you hammer it with too much stress at this stage, you might successfully stop the stretch, but you're also going to reduce your total flower sites and absolutely tank your final yield potential. A little control is great, but too much control, that's just limitation. I really want you to burn this truth into your memory. The
The plant does not care about your schedule. The plant responds to conditions. We've become so obsessed with data lately, right? Substrate moisture sensors, runoff EC, pH monitors, VPD charts. And don't get me wrong, those are fantastic tools. But numbers become deeply dangerous when they start replacing actual observation. Let's be real for a second. You cannot manage a living, breathing organism exclusively off a spreadsheet. So, what should we look out for? Section 4, warning signs of stress, when the crop is in crisis. If you're seeing any of these warning signs, your crop is literally screaming at you to back off. We're talking uneven drybacks across the room, runoff EC climbing higher with every single irrigation, plants wilting right before their next shot of water, lower leaves yellowing way too early, or leaf tips and margins starting to burn. Maybe the stretch stops dead in its tracks, bud development slows to a crawl, or you notice the plants are actually drinking less water instead of more. If your canopy is losing its uniformity, your steering has absolutely crossed the line from a helpful signal into severe stress damage. Which brings us to our final section, mastering dynamic steering and regaining control. The anchor for turning all this around is remarkably simple. A good crop steering program should create controlled direction, not chaos. Seriously, if your room is chaotic, your steering program is broken. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this analogy right here. Think of crop steering exactly like driving a high-performance race car. To navigate those curves, you need smooth input to stay on the track. But if you're flying along at high speed and you violently jerk the steering wheel, you don't go faster. You oversteer, you spin out, and you crash the car. The exact same thing happens to your canopy. A moderate dryback guides the plant gently, an extreme one crashes the system. Well-timed stress improves structure, but constant stress, it's gonna destroy your yield. The absolute best growers in the world aren't the ones pushing the plant to its absolute limits every single day. No, they're the ones who follow these 3 steps dynamically. 1, they know exactly when to push. 2, they know when to hold. And 3, they know exactly when to release the pressure. They adjust this on the fly based on the plant's stage, the specific genetics they're running, the substrate, and the real-time behavior of the plant sitting right in front of them. So, the crucial takeaway here is this. Your goal is not to dominate the plant. The goal is to communicate with it. When you get this right, dynamic steering improves uniformity, controls your stretch perfectly, and optimizes uptake. But when you do it poorly, and you just try to bend the plant to your will, well, it's nothing more than just another form of debilitating stress. Before you start your next run, or program in your next super aggressive dryback, I want you to step back and ask yourself, am I steering the plant, or am I fighting it? Are you actually working with its natural rhythm, or are you just trying to force a spreadsheet into reality? I'll leave you with this final thought. The best growers out there don't just control crops, they listen to them. In an industry that is totally obsessed with pushing boundaries, sometimes the absolute most advanced move you can make is knowing exactly when to do less. So take a hard look at your current canopy. Are you building an environment that lets your genetics thrive, or are you just running a spreadsheet simulation? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, keep adjusting, and I'll see you next time.